Hi, my name is Abraham, and I'm your big brother in recovery, coming back to you with hopefully another educational video. If this is your first time on the channel, by all means, please press the like button. And if what we're saying has depth and weight and makes sense to you, by all means, subscribe and help us carry the message to the newcomer who is still suffering by sharing this channel with your people and your friends in recovery. I want to thank all of you out there who have been following me from the beginning. We're picking up a lot of momentum right now. People from around the world are texting us and leaving us messages telling us that they're getting a lot of value out of what we're sharing right now, because what we're sharing is not our opinion. First of all, it's coming directly out of the big book. So many of people have signed on to take the Sobriety Society International Challenge, which is we're going to go through all 12 steps and we're going to look at how the big book says to do it, simply because Bill W., our co-founder, our founder, said something very interesting that I'd like to read to you if I can find where I put it. He said, and I quote, our chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate, or another word for adequate is sufficient or simple presentation of the 12-step program. This program, watch this, is hard, but it's not supposed to be complicated. Bill said on page 14, simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. And our co-founder, Dr. Bob, said there are two ways to work this program. One, the hard way. Two, the easy way. He defined both. He said the hard way is to make meetings until they make sense. He said the easy way is to read the literature, get a sponsor, take the steps at once, and have a spiritual awakening. That's what he said was the easy way. I chose to do it the way that they said do it. Now, as we often say, we want to jump right into it. We don't want to waste a bunch of time. My suggestion to you today, because what I want to do is wrap up step one, but I'm going to do it in two ways. We've already given you the step one overview. We've already given you step one, digging deep. Today we're going to give you step one, digging deeper. And what we're going to do with digging deeper is we're going to put a bow on the rest of step one from the big book. And I'm going to attempt to show you some stuff from the 12 and 12, because the 12 and 12 is a companion tool for us to understand the steps. Now, let's get right into it. I'd like to draw your attention to Roman numeral page XXVIII. I believe it is 28, 25, 26, 28. And it's in the doctor's opinion. Now, my suggestion to you, listen to this, then go back and then underline what I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to be jumping, I'm going to be moving fast. I don't have a lot of time, right? And I don't want to waste yours. So listen first, then go back. We're going to use the big book in the beginning, and we're going to use the 12 and 12 at the conclusion, and we're going to put a bow on step one, right? Okay, let's go to the doctor's opinion. And what I like to look at is the first, I like to look at the first paragraph. We believe, and I'm going to be jumping around in the paragraph, reading certain parts of the paragraph. Just follow me. We believe that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenal craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found that they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. So we can recreate our lives using the 12 steps. Now I want to show you the importance of a psychic change. I like to go and stay on the bottom of that paragraph, the bottom of that page, the last paragraph, which is the fourth paragraph. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. You like to drink because you like the way it makes you feel, simply because you don't like the way you make you feel. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, bad form, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. That's one of the best definitions I've ever heard of insanity. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. Their abnormal life has become a normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense and ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity, without problems. After they have succumbed to the desire again, because our only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, as so many do, and the phenomenal craving develops, you can't crave until you put something in you. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. How many times have you heard people say that? This is it. This is repeated over and over, unless this person can experience an entire psychic or mind transformation change. There's very little hope of his recovery. So you need to have a psychic change. Now let's keep looking. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, who are they talking about? Those who have never had a psychic change, or those in recovery who have never went through all 12 steps in order to produce the psychic change. Once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despised or despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only necessary or the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. And we found out those few simple rules were on page 98, where Bill said that we need to burn the idea into the consciousness, second paragraph on page 98. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. Here are the simple principles. The only condition is that he trusts God. That's the first principle, first 3 steps. And clean house, step 4 through 11. And last but not least, we're reading the chapter called Working with Others. Help others. That's the third simple rule. And helping others is step 12. Now I want to take you to Roman numeral page XXX. And I'd like for us to start at the 5th paragraph. All these and many others have one symptom in common. Talking about step 1. They cannot start drinking without developing a phenomenon of craving. These phenomena, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, an allergic reaction, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. I've recovered, but I'm not cured. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Entire abstinence means clean, but there's something beyond clean. There's something called sober, clean and sober. But first, a lot of people confuse entire abstinence with sanity, which is sobriety. Just because you haven't used doesn't mean you haven't achieved sanity, right? So now, let's go to page 5. Let's look at Bill's story. Page 5. I'm jumping because I got somewhere to go. Let's look at let's see what I got here for you. Let's look at page 5, but let's look at paragraph 1. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Nevertheless, I still thought, I'm jumping around in the paragraphs. You just read with me or listen to me, you go back and you underline it. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety. Gradually, things got worse. This is Bill. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was true forever. This time I meant business. How many times have you heard that? Shortly afterwards, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So Bill is leading up to his powerlessness. Let's go to page 6. Page 6. Let's look at the first paragraph. I'm going to read stuff from page 6 and page 7. Watch. The remorse and horror, first paragraph, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity, doom. Should I kill myself? No, not now. There was a mental fog. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. Check this out. So 2 bottles and oblivion. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms because we recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. For mine endured this agony 2 more years. He kept going for 2 more. Then came the night when the physical and the mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. People feared for my sanity. So did I. Wow, so Bill talks about the mental and the physical compulsion of addiction because we know the answer is spiritual, page 42, first line, second paragraph. Now I want you to go to page 7, and we're going to look at page 8. Let's start with the third paragraph. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, his abilities, not God's, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining the endless procession of sots who had gone on before me. He's relying on self-knowledge instead of God knowledge. Now here Bill begins to take step 1. Notice what he says in the first paragraph. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Notice the prefix self. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I was overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Bill just did step 1. Watch this. Notice what he's going to say next on page 8. Let's go down to the second paragraph. In reality, that was the end of my last debauch or episode. I was soon to be catapulted into what I call the 4th dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. This is actually a step 1 promise. Now let's keep looking at Bill. Let's look at what Ebby did with him. Let's go to page 11. We're going to look at page 11 in the 3rd paragraph. Let me get there. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Watch this. Doctors had announced him incurable. We're just going to leave that word alone for right now. Society was about to lock him up because you remember it was only detox and it was the mental asylum. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat, step 1. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead like Lazarus, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Wow. Notice that. That's a step 2 promise, or a step 1 promise, rather. Watch this. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. Notice what Bill's going to say. That floored me. The last paragraph on page 11. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in the human heart which had done the impossible. My dear ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Bill knew Ebby personally, and he knew something was different about him. Notice what Bill says. Watch this. Let's look at what he said on page 12. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. Do y'all hear that? That's all. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend, what he saw in Ebby. Because remember, Ebby was sober. Would I have it? Of course I would. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last I saw, watch this, I felt and I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes and a new world came into view. So that pretty much concludes what we're going to do with step 1 from the big book. Now I want to dig deeper. I want you to get your 12 and 12. I'm going to talk about a few things in the 12 and 12 that I want you to look at that you may not know, and we'll put a bow on this, or we'll wrap this up, as they say. But as we know, the 12 and 12 tells us on page 68, and if we look at the first paragraph, it says, only step 1, where we made the 100% admission where we powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps are perfect ideals. So only step 1 is a step we have to work perfectly. Why? If we look on page 33 of the big book, it tells us in the first paragraph, the last 3 sentences, if we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservations of any kind. Now, we're not talking about where Indians reside. We're talking about thoughts, ideas, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol or cured of alcohol. So we have to work that 100%. Now, let's look at page 21, because there are 8 questions in step 1 of the 12 and 12 that you need to ask your sponsee moving forth. And I'm going to give you the 8 questions, and I'm going to show you where they are, because hopefully what you're doing now, you've read the doctor's opinion and Bill's story, because remember we said when you read those 2 chapters, what you walk away from is knowing what the problem is. And the problem in this context is that you're powerless, right? So watch this. Let's look at what the 12 and 12 has to say, the 8 questions that one needs to ask their sponsees. The first one is found in the first line on page 21. Who cares to admit complete defeat? You need to ask your sponsee, are you willing to admit complete defeat? That's a yes or no question. Here is something at the last paragraph, the 4th paragraph of that page. We know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he first accepts his devastating weakness and all its consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness he will find none at all. Proved beyond doubt by an immense experience, this is one of the facts of the AA life. Notice what it says on 22. The principle that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat is the main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. So you have to be honest in step one, 100%. Now the second question is found on page 23. And look at the first paragraph of the last 3 lines. Since step one requires an admission that our lives have become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? Here's the question you need to ask your sponsee. Is there anything special or unique about you or your life that will not allow you to take step one? Let them tell you, because a good sponsor does more listening than talking. Now I'd like to draw your attention to the next paragraph, which is the third question for step one. And it says, if you look at the middle of that paragraph, to the doubters we could say, perhaps you're not an alcoholic after all. You remember on page 44, the first paragraph of the big book, it says, if when you want to, you can't quit entirely, or if when you just read the first paragraph on page 44, and it'll tell you what an alcoholic is. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? Bearing in mind, meanwhile, that we have told you about alcoholism. Big book, page 44, first paragraph. Here is the question, twofold. Do you still doubt that you're an alcoholic? If they say yes, ask them why. Do you need to try more controlled drinking? If they say yes, ask them when. Now let's go to page 24 and look at the fourth question for step one in the 12 and 12. First sentence on the first paragraph on page 24. Why all this insistent that every AA must hit bottom first? You know, your bottom could not only be mental and spiritual, it could be physical. Here's a question to ask your sponsee. Have you hit bottom? If no, how will you know when you have hit bottom? Good question to ask your sponsee. Page 24, here comes the fifth question. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Here's the question to ask your sponsee. Are you willing to be rigorously honest and tolerant? If not, why not? If no, why not? Page 24, here's the sixth question of step one. I'm talking about going deeper now, right? If you choose to do this with your sponsee. Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Here are the questions. Are you willing to confess your faults to another? If no, why not? Second question. Are you willing to make restitutions for harm done? If no, why not? Because guess what? When we get to step 4, that's an important thing we need to know. Here comes the seventh question of the 8 questions that step 1 asks in the 12 and 12. Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? You're going to be doomed when you get to step 11 if you don't get with this starting to at least think about it. Here's the question to ask your sponsee. Are you willing to care about a higher power? If no, why not? Are you willing to care about meditation and prayer? If no, why not? Last question, because there are only 8 questions. Circle the question marks in your 12 and 12 when you read step 1. Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? Because we can only keep what we have by giving it away. Watch this. Are you willing to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer? If no, why not? What do you think I'm doing right now? I'm giving away the knowledge that I've gained in order for me to keep the knowledge that I've acquired. So, the bottom line with step 1, because we're going to wrap this up, is this. Do you believe, or here's another way of putting it, do you admit to your innermost self that you're alcoholic? That's a yes or no question. If you say yes, according to our big book and our 12 and 12, you've just completed step 1. If you're questionable about it, or if you say no, you need to get with your sponsor and you need to do some more reading. Watch this. Moving forth, what we're going to do is we're going to start to take a look at step 2, right? Now, again, I thank you for listening. Go back, rewind the tape, underline some of the stuff that we said, because I jumped in some of the paragraphs and just read some of the key points to expedite the time. Continue to leave your comments, continue to press the like button, and by all means, continue to spread the word about the channel, because guess what? I don't like some of those meetings that are out there. I'm not saying anything bad about them. They just don't work for me. People are talking over folks. I'm not saying mine is this or that. If you like it, fine. If you don't, go over there and listen to the stuff that they're talking about. But one thing about what I'm doing, you can verify it by reading it, right? Nobody's talking over nobody. You don't have to mute nobody, and you can get some clarity. So moving forth, I thank you for listening to me. And guess what? I'm Abraham. I'm a member. I'll talk to you soon. We'll start looking at step 2. All right? Talk to you. Bye.